Hello, welcome to our podcast. It's not all black and white. I'm Cera, I'm black.
I'm Matthew, I'm white, and this is the Interracial Couple Podcast. Welcome again. And so today, actually, let me back up. We just came back from Tanzania yesterday. I had the amazing fortune of getting to run a half marathon at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro, which was starts about the first almost half of it up the mountain and then a little sideways along the mountain and then back down. So if energy seems a little low today, there's been a lot of driving and a lot of running lately. But yesterday on the way back, we had a long drive and it started raining. It was getting dark, and Cera from Nairobi back to Nakuru was doing most of the driving. And as we were talking, at one point she said, like, when it gets dark or when it starts raining a lot, you should drive. And that came because obviously, as I've been driving for much longer than she has been driving. And I guess, would it be fair to say that I'm probably a better driver than you are?
Probably, you have more experience than I do.
Okay.
Also, since we've moved to Kenya, you've done, we don't have a car, but most of the time that we've rented a car, you have done most of the driving because I was just too scared to do it.
Yeah, it's a little driving here is a little crazy, particularly depending on where we're driving. But a lot of the smaller roads that we're on are windy with motorcycles on the side, sometimes going the wrong way, sometimes going the right way, sometimes with a couch on the back, sometimes with 3 or 4 people, sometimes with goats, all sorts of different things. And then there's goats on the side of the road along with people and little children and tiny little roads.
Yeah, and there's no street lights. It's dark.
It's a little there are times where it's pretty harrowing.
And I only learned how to drive when I was 27 in the US. So pretty much I've never driven in my own country. So the driving that I learned how to drive was in America on the other side of the car, and here we drive on the other side of the street.
Yeah. So as we're driving, there was this moment where you're like, okay, well, actually, maybe I should keep driving because how am I going to improve if every time it gets scary, I give it up?
Yeah, and one time I read this, and I think it came from this book that I'd read. It's called The Confidence Code, and it's written by 2 women. I don't remember what the name of the author is. But they were talking about confidence comes from doing and it comes from action. And then I was as it was getting dark and I couldn't see and it started to rain, I was like, Matthew, I think you should drive. But then I remembered that book and I was like, every time it starts raining or it gets dark, I'm like, Matthew, you should drive. And I was like, but if confidence is done by doing, then actually what I'm doing is every time I say that, and I actually let you do it, it's I don't get to practice. And then I'm not in action, which means that my confidence in driving, I'm not getting any confidence. In any case, I'm losing confidence in my driving. And that's where today's topic came from. And I was like, I think we should talk about this in the podcast about how when you are a couple, I think you actually say that when you're a couple, one person does one thing well than the other person. And so it just becomes since you're good at that, just do that.
Right. The default kind of goes back to that. And then how do you get better at something that you're not doing? Of course, conversely, why spend time getting better at something that you're not as good at if somebody else can do that, and then you can do the things you're better at, and then we maximize our abilities, our capabilities, our strong suits, rather than spending time struggling with something that we know the other one can just do better.
Yeah, and then I was even talking to you about I've been using an iPhone since I bought a smartphone. I've been using an iPhone, and it's probably more expensive than an Android, but I don't want to learn how to use an Android. So I've just stuck to what I know, and I think we do that in the relationship. Mm-hmm. It's we stick to what we know. And then we looked at different things in our relationship where we've stuck to what we know.
Right. Yeah, I want to go back. The driving one was interesting yesterday too, for me anyways, because this has come up, but it comes up sometimes where if you're good at something and then you end up just doing it more and then that becomes the default, at times we both actually seen where the other's gotten a little bit resentful, right? And let's go into the kitchen with, say, cleaning or cooking. Cooking is definitely something that I do more of.
True.
Cleaning is something you tend to do more of. And because you are better at cleaning and I am better at cooking, you do more of that, I do more of the cooking. And then there are times where you just get a little frustrated, like do more cleaning, or I get frustrated, do more cooking. But we actually have created a system that actually leads us in some ways to almost an inevitable frustration.
I know, like I talked to you about this. Like once this weekend, we went to Tanzania with a couple, with another couple, our friends, and we got to their house and they made dinner and we were supposed to do the cleaning. And so you started doing the cleaning, and then I was like, no, let me do the cleaning since I'm faster and better at it, like my words. Mm-hmm. But what you did was like you walked away. And I had some resentment to that. I was like, wait, even though I said I was faster and better at this, I didn't mean for you to walk away. Maybe hang around, talk to me while I'm doing it. But you were like, okay, I'm off the hook, and you just left.
I did. Though, do you know what I did do when I left?
You went and made my bed.
There you go. Okay. Just for the rest, since we are on the record, I just wanted to put that out.
But all I'm saying is like when you walked away, because I said I was good at it, I had some resentment.
Right. Yeah. And I get that also even with driving. There have been times where I feel like, oh, I'm tired. So even, right after running a marathon, I was, I forget exactly how the driving was split up. But there are times where, okay, I'm doing it, or even not even after the marathon, before the marathon, I did more driving. So just because I'm more used to it, therefore I am better at it, and therefore because of those two things, it defaults back to me, and so that I'm doing it, and I'm thinking, wait, I don't actually want to be doing this. Like I'm going to run a lot. I need to get ready, sitting and driving, and we drove over between Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Saturday we also drove because we went up onto the mountain on Kilimanjaro on the fourth day. So literally Wednesday was 6 hours of driving. Thursday was about 5 hours of driving. Friday was probably 7 hours of driving. Saturday was a ton of driving. Well, maybe our least amount, but over 2 hours of driving on Saturday. Sunday, we drove back to Nairobi. Monday, we drove from Nairobi to Nakuru. So all of this driving, and at the beginning of the trip, I was starting to feel a little bit resentful too, that I had to do more of the driving because that's just the default. And I'm actually totally a part of that system that wasn't really serving our relationship.
It's interesting when you say that, because I'm listening to you right now and I have some resentment because I feel like I did a lot of driving on that trip
you
too.
Did. You absolutely did.
Like I drove from here to Nairobi. Like I almost drove from not here, but I drove like quite a bit to Nairobi. And then on our way back, once we got to Kenya side of the country, like I did most of that driving, and then...
No, afterwards you actually did more driving the second half. The first half of the trip, I did more of the driving, and I started to get that I was getting a little bit resentful and I was going to do it anyways. And then this conversation came up while you were driving, and I ended up not taking the wheel, and I ended up getting to sit there and not having to drive.
No, you did not happen to just take the wheel. You happened to be like telling me how to drive while you're seated, which is the same thing I do. I just...
Okay, fair enough. It was a little scary, I have to admit. It was raining a lot. It was pitch black, and the lights somehow had been so muddy that even with the rain, I think it got on the headlights. But anyways, kind of the point really was that we create these certain systems that seem to work for us by letting the person who has a little bit more capacity in that, and then there's the even in the driving thing, right, is that you can say, well, now it's also clear that sort of what the expectations are. It does mean that at times there's also less thinking about what do we have to prepare for. If we just know that you do this, I do that, that simplifies things. I'm going to get better at the things that I do, whether it's driving or cooking. You might get better at, what would we say before? It was like, certainly like packing was something that you did well. Even when moving around Kenya, for me, that was something that I've seen that I, like with my Swahili is embarrassingly not good after being here for over a year because you speak Swahili fluently, you know your way around the country. So I go into backseat mode and let you drive and all this, like drive, when I say that, I mean like get to steer the train, as it were. And so therefore, my Swahili is not as good as it should be.
And you think that if I wasn't showing you around, that you'd actually put more effort?
Well, we had our friends that we were in Tanzania with, they're both expats. And so when they go out and they're doing stuff outside of the house, they actually have to go back to their pocket dictionary. They have to be practicing, and they're actually regularly, like we saw that with Peter, like put regularly in a position where he had to use Swahili, whereas I'm almost never in a situation where I have to use Swahili.
Because I will help you out.
You'll do that, or even like I didn't even get decent at navigating around the country until you were gone for 2 months. I was here by myself, and during those 2 months, like people were shocked at how quickly my Swahili was improving, that I was walking all over the country. I was taking matatus all over on my own and getting around really, really well. And then you came back and immediately I went back into the old, I don't need to assert myself in any of these areas because you will assert yourself. There's even something else too, speaking about asserting too, is that's something that you do really well, is you don't care as much what other people think of you like I do. So if we're in a difficult situation, I might try and like make nice or like just kind of let it go. But you don't do that. You don't mind being confrontational. So therefore, when a confrontation needs to happen, that's another area where I just say, I'll let you do the confrontation. I'll kind of step back, which actually takes away from my ability to improve in that area where I need to improve.
I know. So I'm just wondering, like, how can I don't know, like what should we do? So like in those instances, like in the instance of like, yes, I speak Swahili, I know the culture, I know the language, I know the way the people act. So sometimes like I just feel like you don't, mm-hmm. But it's like sometimes when I do that, it's like I want to help, but then you're not practicing.
Right. For me, it's fantastic for me actually when you do that. I think we might have talked about this on an earlier podcast. But like I actually really like having the opportunity to not steer the train, because I'm a pretty type A person. I do a lot. I'm very active. And so when I have these opportunities to not, it actually, in a lot of ways, it feels very good for me.
Until it's not.
Well, but it takes away a certain ability. When we go back to the driving thing, if I'm always the one driving, you're never going to actually be you're never going to be as good as you could be if you weren't with me. And therefore, I become like a handicap for you.
That's true. I really had, like, I thought about it last night when we were talking about it, and I was like, I've lived my life without you, and I've survived all these, like...
I don't know how you survived without me all these years.
But I was like, I need to be careful so that I don't fall into this bad habit and, dependence of you are good at this, so I don't have to do it. And I think, like, also because as I live in a society where women are not expected to do so much, like if I didn't drive, no one would be like, oh, she doesn't drive. Like, there's a lot of things that I could get away without doing in my society. And to me, it's like, I am really careful that I don't fall into that, So that's why I was like, actually, I want to drive. I don't care. Like, if I was alone, like, I started to imagine, like, if I didn't have you in my life and I was in Nairobi, I would have had to drive home to Nakuru,
right. You would have found a way for sure.
And I've always have. And I was like, all these years I have, even like, let's say like you're good at cooking and I'm not good at cooking. But if I'm alone, I will do the cooking.
Okay, that's actually also a very good one because I was gone for a while and I came home and you had leftovers and you'd made really nice food.
I know. I think I went on a ketogenic diet and I went and I looked for like keto recipes. And then you came home And I was like, I don't know what to eat. I don't know what to cook.
Right.
But the other thing is like, I felt like because I'm not such a good cook. So when I was eating my own food, I didn't feel like judged for, not that you judge me, but I was just like, it's me who's eating it. Like, so I was my own judge. But when you came back home, it just meant that I had to like up my cooking,
Not for me, for you, because you're worried about being judged. But kind of going back to that too, there was that day where you walked, I didn't want to cook. I was feeling grumpy. I think we might have talked about this a couple of weeks ago. And you're like, you even said, I don't know how to cook chicken. Which is like, because when I'm there, those things, it's like, even like, I don't know how to speak Swahili, but I guarantee you, when you're not around, I get by.
That's not what I meant. What I meant is like, I don't know how to make chicken the way you make chicken. I only know how to make chicken the way I make chicken, which is not as good as the way you make chicken.
Okay, that's fair enough. But that's not that was that moment. It was like, wait a second. And so there's sort of a positive and a negative side to that.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, before we move on to that positive and negative side, one of the things that I had to deal with last night when it's raining really hard and it was really hard to see was that I actually had to become okay with whatever the consequences were of that. And in some ways, my chances of getting in an accident are, I don't know, we could kind of debate the merits of this, but for the sake of this argument, because of just the years of experience that I have of driving, etc., my chances of being in an accident are less than yours. Just being able to judge distance, lights at night, things like that, okay? So then for me to just be able to say, you know what, this is okay actually. I have to actually be okay with whatever the consequences are once again, because, I've gotten into accidents before. I've done those things and I had to make mistakes in order to learn that. Like I know certain things because I've made mistakes. I've spun out on wet roads more than once. So I've had those experiences and now I can say, well, let me do it so that it doesn't happen again. But you might need to spin out at some point to know know certain limits. And I had to yesterday. I just think, you know what? I'm okay with whatever happens. If an accident happens, whatever happens, or if it just takes us longer because you're more timid in certain situations, then it takes us longer to get home and or whatever happens.
And I have to say, like, I'm really, really thankful that you actually let me drive home yesterday. And
I supported you. You supported me. I didn't let you. I don't quite have that power yet. I am the man of the house, but I'm not the king of the house.
Okay. But I'm also like really grateful for myself for giving myself that chance and having the guts to say, you know what, it's risky. I may get in an accident. I'm driving at night, on like Nairobi, Kampala highway with so many trucks, like every minute was just like, I'm passing a truck, I'm passing another truck, going to Kampala. And I was just like...
Or 10 matatas are passing you really fast.
Yeah, and it was just like, oh my God. And people don't even leave a tailgating. Like, people just tailgate so much. And I was like, in the beginning when it said to happen, I was really scared. But almost like on our way halfway home, I was fine. I was passing. I was also like tailgating other people. Like, I was learning the way people drive on the street. And if I had not done it, then I would know, then I would be in this place of like fear. And now I feel like, yeah, it's not going to be a big deal if I have to drive home in the dark from Nairobi to Nakuru.
Yeah. And so there was this other, right? So then we're going to talk about a little bit of the positive side and the negative side, because the positive side, I think, is actually pretty interesting.
There's a lot of efficiency.
It is. And it's led to some really good things. I read this study a long time ago, a friend sent to me, that said, the memory and kind of capabilities of a married couple is more like that of 3 people instead of 2. And the scientific reasoning and psychology behind that is that there are certain things you're better at remembering or doing. And because you're better at remembering it and doing it, I actually don't have to. Because I can be like, oh, do you remember this thing? Do you know whatever that is? You can jump in and take over. So I actually sort of have a personal repository for things that I'm not as good at remembering or doing, and the other way around. So
like not ordering menus and just going like, I'm gonna have whatever she's having.
Pretty much, right? So it makes our lives more efficient in a lot of ways. Though, which is great, right? Because then we can accomplish a lot more. We can, there's less stress. You're not doing things that are really hard for you. I'm not doing things that are really hard for me. And if you're better at it, I presume you probably like it more than I do. So therefore, I'm spending less time doing things I don't like and more time things I do like, and vice versa. And therefore, we just maximize our time and our enjoyment of life and things we can remember.
I feel like we're like very efficient in the kitchen. Like when you cook and I clean, and like we pretty do very well. Like we finish, like the kitchen doesn't become like such a huge chore, like for both of us. It's like, like all I have to do is cook, and I know like all I have to do is clean, and you get better at, you've gotten like really good at cooking, and I've gotten even better at cleaning.
Yeah, right. And it's even just time, right? If we have like half an hour to get something ready, we can easily do that together. So I think that's one side. The other, I think on the downside for that, there's probably twofold. One is that you see how easily we can stratify certain roles, and it's become certainly a cultural thing with gender roles. And I was thinking about this last night while we're driving. Was, wait a second, in 18 months, let's just say you're a parent, and you have a baby, and mom is the one who can nurse. There's no two ways around that, and let's say mom wants to stay home while the baby's nursing. And after 18 months, she's gotten just better at it. Now, if dad says, you know what, I'm going to do this for the next 18 months, dad has to go through that learning curve. Well, if we're a unit together, why should it's almost like reinventing the wheel. And then you can see just how quickly in one person's lifetime this quick stratification happens. So not only is that these cultural norms, certain family norms and family patterns that aren't necessarily great, but then we also begin to rob the other of a certain opportunity or experience.
Yeah, I think it's like really important for couples, like even us coming to that realization is like, just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I get to do it all the time. Like in the case of like a parent, to me was like, once we have a child and I'm the one who's breastfeeding the child and staying home, like I will be better than you are.
Well, I've done it a few times already.
Yeah, but to be fair, every child is different. But I'm just saying, like, it can become so easy that I am the better parent and you're just like, I don't know.
Well, none of it's about a better parent. It's just more like certain quirks. Like what does the kid need, or even just balancing the need of the child with certain household stuff, or even, work plus child plus whatever. You can begin to see how those things become pretty deeply ingrained. And, in some ways I feel like that there's a support element that we actually need for each other, let's say for me in speaking Swahili, I'm going to need extra support from you in order to also allow me to be not as good, for me to struggle. And I could on one side say, why are you making me struggle? And the other say is, thank you for giving me the opportunity to live up to this challenge.
Yeah, I think I just have to pay more attention, like when we go out, is that I don't help you so fast, which sometimes I tend to do. Or not even, like there's some expectation that Sarah has, like I got this. Like I did most of the talking when we went to Tanzania.
Which I love, by the way, but it doesn't necessarily help me.
No, it doesn't.
I really like it.
Yeah, it doesn't. And like I did most of the talking, and like the last example I think like we're gonna give is like I also noticed like I did not care like how to calculate Tanzanian money. Like I did the talking, I just withdrew the money and I gave it to you to pay, because I just didn't want to learn how to do the conversion of the money. So I was just like, Matthew does it. And
Tanzania has pretty big numbers. So
oh my God.
You go and you get, the bill, you get a bill and it comes and it's whatever it was, thousands of Tanzanian shillings, and your mind starts to spin a little bit.
Our dinner was like 110,000. And I was like, I can't do this. But like I was just, and that's the thing, like I was like, I can't do this, and I just passed it to you. But then when the people came to talk, it was just easier for me to speak in Swahili, and even though I don't speak Swahili like Tanzanians do, it was still easier for me,
Right.
I am the local, and you just get to sit there and like I order the food, I do the talking,
Yeah, and so kind of like finding where that balance is and I think that in some ways it's got to be a conscious conversation, And I kind of think back there, it can just be so easy to fall into certain patterns that ends up not being super helpful. But some of those are helpful. And I was just really grateful that we've had this opportunity to have this conversation around it, because I want to acknowledge when it really serves us, and
when it becomes a dependency.
Or when it just becomes, it's just sort of a handicap. Like I could do that, and it could even be robbing me of an experience or a challenge if I don't take the opportunity.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah. So that was like one of the things. It's like, for me, I think the big lesson from our yesterday's conversation is like, I gotta watch out, especially as a woman, that I don't let the man do like the things that men are supposed to be good at, because the only way men become good at those things is by doing and practicing. And like, I have to keep practicing so that I become as good.
Right. And we started talking about one of the things that's actually can be very difficult and negative for young boys is this pressure of, you can't say I can't do it. Like, right, I got this. It's a little bit of this sort of pressure that we have. And I was thinking, how much of my ability is actually, which I'm happy to have now, but actually came from a cultural unhealthy relationship with sort of masculinity, which is, don't ask for help, buckle up, figure it out, do it on your own, you can handle this, you don't need help, kind of thing. Like I never would say I couldn't do it. It's just not my thing. I mean, even when there was this time when I was on climbing a mountain and I had to jump over this, literally it was 1,000 feet down at least. And it was an easy jump if it had been a foot down. If it was like a curb, it would have been fine, but it was 1,000 feet. And I was super scared. And I turned around, I was like, I can't do it, that's too much. And then, of course, this other thing kicks back in, which is, you're not going to get this far and turn back now. And I'm thrilled I had that, but I also know that there's another side to that that's a little challenging. But like you said, this for you also is to make sure that you actually, so society isn't going to push you in that way, particularly around like driving, but it would push me. So you in some ways need to push yourself, but then I also need to really be supportive of that. And I think we can find that way of really being able to support each other in these areas where we're not as good, and seeing when is it really serving us and when is it just giving ourselves a handicap.
Yeah. So to wrap up this podcast, like my question is to whoever who is listening to this is like, as a couple, like what are those things that one of the couple is really good at, and what like the challenges of like that comes with when you let your partner do something that you probably should also be doing.
Yeah, and you're really sort of looking at that, or what are any strategies they have, or things that are almost, that you recognize that you would like to at least express out loud. Hey, I want to be able to work on this more. I want my partner to feel like he or she can work on this more without my judgment, because we also have to take responsibility that we judge ourselves and we judge the other, and just let me do it is certainly something I've said myself, I've seen in other couples around very often, is like, just let me do it, right? I'm better at it, just let me do it, rather than, no, go ahead. If he wants to vacuum the floor and he's going to do a crappy job, just let him do a crappy job vacuuming. He's not going to get better at it if he doesn't get an opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
So, thanks for joining us on our podcast. It's Not All Black and White.
I'm Cera, I'm black.
I'm Matthew, I'm white. This is the Interracial Couple Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.